At first glance, it looks like just another bowl of noodle soup. But then you notice the bright red broth, the golden pieces of tofu, the fresh herbs, and those delicate clusters of crab floating on the surface. One spoonful later, and many travelers have exactly the same reaction: surprise, confusion, and then complete silence. Because Bún Riêu doesn't taste like anything they expected. It's rich, yet refreshing, savory, yet slightly tangy, comforting, but filled with flavors that seem to change with every bite. Some visitors finish the entire bowl, others come back the very next morning. And long after leaving Vietnam, many still remember that first taste. So, what exactly is Bún Riêu? Why does this humble Vietnamese noodle soup create such a powerful reaction? And how did a simple family meal become one of the most unforgettable food experiences in Vietnam? Today, we're going beyond the surface to discover the story inside the bowl. Vietnam is famous for noodle soups. Most travelers have already heard of pho, many know bún bò Huế, some arrive searching for banh mi, spring rolls, or Vietnamese coffee. But Bún Riêu often catches them completely unprepared. There is no dramatic presentation, no expensive dining room, and usually no attempt to make the dish look luxurious. It may be served at a tiny family-run shop, on a crowded sidewalk, or deep inside a neighborhood most tourists would never think to visit. Yet the moment the bowl arrives, it demands attention. The broth has a distinctive red-orange color, created by tomatoes and natural oils released during cooking. Floating above it are pieces of tofu, fresh herbs, rice noodles, and the ingredient that gives the dish its identity: riu qua. These delicate crab clusters are made from freshwater crab, carefully prepared and cooked until they form soft, flavorful pieces. For Vietnamese diners, this combination feels familiar. It tastes like childhood, like a morning at the market, like sitting beside family on an ordinary day. But for someone trying it for the first time, the experience can be difficult to describe. The broth is not heavy like a creamy soup. It isn't overwhelmingly spicy, and it doesn't depend on one dominant flavor. Instead, sweetness from the crab, acidity from the tomatoes, saltiness from the seasoning, and freshness from the herbs all arrive at different moments. That balance is what makes the first spoonful so surprising. And even after finishing the bowl, many visitors still feel as though they haven't completely understood it. They only know one thing: they want another taste. Watch someone taste Bún Riêu for the first time, and you'll often see the same sequence. First, they study the bowl. They try to identify the ingredients. They mix the noodles, add a little lime, perhaps some chili, and then take a cautious first bite. For a brief moment, there's no reaction at all. Then the expression changes. Some raise their eyebrows, some immediately reach for another spoonful, and others look directly at the camera, as if they need someone to confirm that the flavor is real. One traveler described it as delicious, right down to the final drop. Another finished the broth after the noodles were gone, and many are surprised by just how light the meal feels, despite the number of ingredients inside the bowl. That reaction matters, because these visitors often come from places where breakfast is simple: toast, eggs, cereal, perhaps coffee on the way to work. In Vietnam, a steaming bowl of noodles can be breakfast. It can also be lunch, dinner, or the meal you search for late in the afternoon because nothing else sounds quite right. And for many foreigners, that idea changes the way they think about morning food. Breakfast doesn't have to be dry, it doesn't have to be sweet, and it certainly doesn't have to be boring. It can be hot, fresh, deeply savory, and prepared with the same care as any major meal of the day. But the flavor alone is only part of the reason Bún Riêu becomes so memorable. To understand the rest, you have to look at how the bowl is made. The heart of Bún Riêu is the broth, and unlike many dishes that rely on one powerful ingredient, this broth is built in layers. Tomatoes provide color, gentle acidity, and a natural sweetness that becomes deeper as they cook. Freshwater crab brings richness and a distinctive aroma. Seasoning adds saltiness and depth, and depending on the region or the cook, the bowl may include tofu, pork, snails, blood pudding, fried shallots, or other ingredients chosen by the family preparing it. But the most important part is balance. Too much tomato, and the broth becomes sharply sour. Too much seasoning, and the delicate crab disappears. Too much oil, and the bowl loses the lightness that makes it so easy to eat. A skilled cook knows that no single flavor should overpower the others. The broth should be strong enough to remain memorable, but gentle enough that you want to keep drinking it. Then come the noodles, soft rice vermicelli that carry the broth without becoming too heavy. The tofu absorbs the flavor around it. The herbs bring freshness. Lime adds brightness. Chili gives the diner control over the heat. And fermented shrimp paste, when offered, adds an intensity that can completely transform the bowl. For first time visitors, that small bowl of shrimp paste may look intimidating. The aroma is powerful, the flavor is unfamiliar. But used carefully, it becomes another layer, not something separate from the dish. This is one of the most fascinating things about Vietnamese food. The meal is not always finished when it reaches the table. The diner completes it. A little lime, a few herbs, more chili, perhaps a touch of shrimp paste. Every bowl begins with the cook, but the final flavor belongs to the person eating it. And that makes each experience personal. Bún Riêu was never created to impress tourists. It did not begin as a luxury dish. Its roots are humble, connected to local markets, fresh ingredients, and families making the most of what was available. Freshwater crabs could be found in rural areas. Tomatoes were affordable. Rice noodles were filling. Herbs could be gathered or bought at local markets. Together, these ingredients created a meal that was nourishing, flavorful, and accessible to ordinary people. That history is still visible today. Even in a busy city, some of the most loved bowls are served in places with plastic stools, metal tables, simple cooking equipment, and no elaborate decoration. The restaurant may have only a few dishes on the menu. The cook may have prepared the same broth for decades, and the regular customers often know exactly where to sit, what to order, and how much chili to add before they even pick up the menu. To an international visitor, the setting may initially seem chaotic. Motorbikes pass just a few meters away. People arrive and leave constantly. The sound of bowls, chopsticks, conversation, and street traffic all blend together. But after sitting down, the chaos begins to make sense. The street is not separate from the restaurant. It is part of the restaurant. The sounds, the movement, the heat from the cooking pot, and the conversation with the vendor all become part of the meal. That is something no recipe can recreate. You can make a bowl of bún riêu in another country. You can import the noodles, buy the spices, follow every step correctly. But recreating the feeling of eating it on a Vietnamese sidewalk in the middle of an ordinary morning is far more difficult. In many parts of Vietnam, the best known food stall is not always the biggest one. Sometimes it has no English sign, no social media team, no polished menu. It may be hidden beside a market, under an old awning, or inside a narrow street. Yet every morning the seats fill quickly. Why? Because Vietnamese food culture has long depended on trust. A customer eats somewhere, likes the food, and tells a friend. That friend brings a relative. A family returns week after week. And slowly, a small stall becomes part of the neighborhood. Its reputation is not built through advertising. It is built one bowl at a time. This can be confusing for travelers. They may walk past a modern restaurant with an empty dining room, only to find dozens of people sitting shoulder to shoulder at a simple stall nearby. But local diners notice details visitors may miss: the aroma of the broth, the speed at which ingredients are replaced, the number of regular customers, the way the vendor remembers familiar faces. A crowded stall is often more than a place to eat. It is evidence. Evidence that the food has been tested morning after morning by the people who know it best. And once foreign visitors understand that, they begin searching differently. They stop looking only for beautiful restaurants. They follow the crowds. They watch where local workers eat. They look down small streets. And suddenly, an entirely different Vietnam opens in front of them. There is another reason Bún Riêu remains interesting, even after you have tried it once. The dish is never exactly the same everywhere. A bowl in Hanoi may feel light, balanced, and focused on the natural flavor of crab and tomato. In other areas, the broth may be stronger, the toppings more generous, the seasoning bolder. Some versions include snails, others add pork, tofu, or different types of Vietnamese sausage. One vendor may use large pieces of crab mixture. Another may create softer clusters that disappear into the broth. Even the herbs served on the side can change from place to place. This means that trying Bún Riêu once does not mean you fully know the dish. You may love one version, then discover another that tastes completely different. For travelers, this creates a kind of culinary treasure hunt. They begin comparing bowls: the one near the market, the one in a hidden alley, the one recommended by a local driver, the one they found by accident because every other table was full. And that is often how a visitor becomes attached to Vietnamese food, not through one perfect restaurant, but through a series of small discoveries. Each bowl becomes connected to a place, a face, a morning, a conversation. And before long, the dish is no longer just something they ate. It becomes part of how they remember Vietnam. Then there is the price. For many international visitors, the amount of food inside one bowl seems almost impossible for the cost. Noodles, crab, tofu, tomatoes, fresh herbs, multiple toppings, and a broth that may have taken hours to prepare. In many places, all of this costs less than a simple lunch in their home country. But calling Bún Riêu cheap does not fully explain its value. The remarkable part is not only the low price, it is the amount of work hidden behind it. Ingredients must be prepared early. The broth must be monitored. Crab must be cleaned and processed. Herbs must be washed. Toppings must remain fresh. And everything has to be ready before the first customers arrive. The bowl may be served quickly, but it was not created quickly. That contrast surprises many travelers. What appears to be an ordinary street meal often contains years of experience, hours of preparation, and knowledge passed through generations. Perhaps that is why the dish feels so generous. It gives the diner far more than they expected, without demanding attention for the effort behind it. When travelers leave Vietnam, they may remember the famous landmarks: the crowded streets, the motorbikes, the markets, the heat, the noise. But food memories work differently. They return unexpectedly. The smell of tomatoes cooking, the sound of chopsticks against a bowl, steam rising into the morning air, the sharp taste of lime, the warmth of the broth, a plastic stool beside a busy street. These details seem small while they are happening, but later they become some of the clearest memories of the entire journey. And perhaps that is why so many visitors speak emotionally about Bún Riêu. They are not only remembering the flavor, they are remembering where they were, who served them, and what it felt like to experience something completely unfamiliar, then suddenly feel at home. A humble bowl of noodles managed to cross a cultural distance without needing any translation. No explanation was required. One taste was enough. Bún Riêu may not be Vietnam's most internationally famous dish, at least not yet. But for those who discover it, that may be exactly what makes it special. It still feels local, personal, and deeply connected to everyday Vietnamese life. It carries the sweetness of crab, the brightness of tomato, the freshness of herbs, and the experience of generations who have prepared it in their own way. To some people, it is simply breakfast. To others, it is a comforting meal after a long day. But to many international visitors, it becomes the flavor they never expected and the one they cannot forget. So if you ever find yourself in Vietnam, look beyond the famous restaurants. Follow the morning crowds. Take a seat on the small plastic stool. Add a little lime, maybe some chili, and try the bowl before you. Because sometimes the most unforgettable part of a country is hidden inside its most ordinary meal. This is Beyond Vietnam, where food is never just food, and every bowl has a story.